The specialists here will be able to travel to Pikanchicum once a week, and they can stay longer.
Good news for residents of a First Nation in Ontario who need to travel for health care.
This is actually quite interesting, is some poetry that folks have written about being Two-Spirit.
A little-known history of Two-Spirit people is explored in Winnipeg.
We could be cut off from down south at any time. The lettuce down south that gets shipped up here is almost 21 days old.
A green garden provides delicious food security for a First Nation in Ontario. Good evening, I'm Leanne Sanders. Welcome to APTN National News. It's been a busy week in Ottawa as members of Parliament have returned from the summer break. On Wednesday on Parliament Hill, Ontario First Nations voiced their displeasure with the Liberals' Métis self-government legislation, while a few hundred yards away, those for and against LGBTQ identity rights in the classroom clashed on Wellington Street. Every Child Matters flags were seen amongst the protesters, and a Nazi flag was placed on the National Aboriginal Veterans Monument. A cleanup of the monument site is scheduled for Friday morning. According to the Ottawa Police Service on X, formerly known as Twitter, 5 arrests were made in relation to the protests on Wednesday, including 3 for public incitement of hatred. To Manitoba now, where the rich history of Two-Spirit people has a home, thanks to a growing archive at the University of Winnipeg. Sav Jonesa went to the archives to see what stories are there.
This rainbow crown and jingle dress live here at the University of Winnipeg in the most comprehensive archive on Two-Spirit people in the country.
This is actually quite interesting, is some poetry that folks have written about being Two-Spirit.
University archivist and digital curator Brett Lahid oversees the collection, which is guided by a Two-Spirit advisory council.
I think Two-Spirit people, due to colonial practice, have sort of been told that their histories don't matter, and they absolutely do.
He says the archives are a reclamation of space.
The Two-Spirit Archives tells a story of decolonialization, of resurgence, of celebration of Two-Spirit people. It tells the story of Two-Spirit people being exposed to genocide, to cultural genocide, demonstrating that Two-Spirit people, through these horrific tactics, are here. They remained, they survived, and now they are finding their place.
A 2011 donation by Two-Spirit activist Albert McLeod started the archive, a collection on the community that spans across 40 years.
This collection here is part of my journey, and I didn't want it lost. I didn't want it thrown in the garbage. I wanted it to continue to tell the story of my journey of survival. It's amazing.
McLeod, the director of Two-Spirit Consultants of Manitoba, says many historical items of Two-Spirit people are lost when they die, and the archives are a way to make sure they live on.
I have great concerns for that Two-Spirit history, that many of them are spread out now across Canada, living in large cities like Montreal, Toronto. Their collections will be lost, their photographs will be lost, the names in their photographs, the people, the places, the events will be lost to history.
Shirts, posters, photographs, and video show the lives and activism of Two-Spirit people across the country.
They are coming from the 50s, the 60s, and 70s when Indigenous people were activists for their human rights, and we were walking along in that period, and we've done our own journey as well. So it's not one group of rights. Like, human rights belong to everyone, and the Two-Spirit narrative, the Two-Spirit path needs to be included with Indigenous activism, Indigenous liberation in Canada.
Though most materials are from decades past, McLeod says the history of Two-Spirit people is still in the making.
We have young Two-Spirit people now who are meme makers, they're filmmakers, they're singers, they're artists, you know, they're out there in the world creating all this very fabulous, important stuff. And we need to collect that and remember it and preserve it.
Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And more jingles.
A First Nation in northwestern Ontario, near the Manitoba border, is expanding its health services for its youth. The Pikangikum Ojibwe Nation has opened a clinic in Winnipeg. The new location allows the community to hire its own staff rather than rely on contracted workers. It will offer services such as speech, language pathology, physiotherapy, psychology, and social work to youth on reserve. Pikangikum Chief Shirley Keeper says before the new program, families had to travel to see specialists that aren't familiar with Indigenous practices. Now those services will be brought to the community.
You'll be able to travel to Pikangikum once a week, and they can stay longer. They can better provide the services and get to know our children and our grandchildren. Not just a short visit, they can work with them.
Two Ontario sisters and their mother are being charged by the Nunavut RCMP for fraudulently claiming to be Nunavut Inuit and using that status to defraud organizations. Amira and Nadia Gill and their mother Karima Manji are expected to appear in court in Iqaluit, Nunavut on October 30th. The two sisters made headlines earlier this year after Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, the territory's land claims organization, removed their Inuit status following an internal investigation. All three are now charged with 2 counts of fraud over $5,000. This week, the Senate Committee on Indigenous Peoples heard from organizations that have not yet released their records on Indian residential schools. Senators heard from representatives and witnesses, including those from the BC Royal Museum and the chief coroners of the Northwest Territories, Ontario, and Quebec. The chief coroner of Quebec highlighted some of the progress they made in that province and how it can help in other provinces.
Archives were created, as we know them today, by legislation that was brought about in 1986. It was an act concerning the research for causes of and circumstances of death. On November 1st, 2022, it became the Coroner's Act. And the coroner-in-chief became the guardian of the archives. Before that, there were no archives. Before 1986, the files of a coroner were kept in the courts throughout the provinces. And those files since have been gathered up.
Workers excavating gravel made a grim discovery near Killarney, Manitoba, 238 kilometers southwest of Winnipeg. They were working in a field on September 19th when they discovered human remains. RCMP forensics experts and an anthropology team are working at the site. The remains have not yet been identified. Meanwhile, RCMP major crimes investigators in Saskatchewan say human remains found in a forested area southeast of North Battleford just over a week ago were those of 20-year-old Natana Scarlett, missing since July 4th. Her disappearance was reported to police on August 7th. Major Crimes is still trying to determine how she died, but say they consider the circumstances suspicious. We have to take a quick break now, but when we come back, a greenhouse on a First Nation in Ontario celebrates its first harvest. Welcome back. After 27 years of leadership under Audrey Poitras, there's a new president in Alberta Métis politics. Andrea Sandmeyer is the new president-elect of the Métis Nation of Alberta. The unofficial results, which were not released until early Wednesday morning, show that Sandmeyer received 5,693 votes to Joseph Pimlott's 2,131. She becomes the first new president for the Métis Nation of Alberta in almost 3 decades. Outgoing President Audrey Poitras has led the MNA since 1996. An Anishinaabe First Nation in Ontario is celebrating its first harvest of leafy greens. The state-of-the-art hydroponic greenhouses have been 6 years in the making. Here's Annette Francis with that story.
This is our Green Star lettuce, very high end. It's got some nice dark green to it.
Mackenzie Jones is proud to show off his next fresh crop of greens. The Minojan or Grow Well greenhouse in Nipissing First Nation is made up of trailers with a vertical growing system. And all sorts of different lettuces and herbs grow here. He says it's one answer to food security.
We could be cut off from down south at any time. The lettuce down south that gets shipped up here is almost 21 days old. There's also a higher possibility that there is salmonella or E. coli on it from their growing methods. The way that we grow, everything is controlled. We have such a little risk of that I can guarantee you that this will not happen.
Mike Harney has been the lead in the project. When he was the economic development officer in the community, he created a feasibility study in 2017. The greenhouse opened with its first seeding in June, and the first harvest was last month. He's thrilled with the results.
The romaine lettuce is great, but then I tried the butter crunch, and I said, oh, that's even better. So everything I try is really better than expected.
According to business operations manager Jen Cucci, up to 75,000 heads of lettuce can be produced over a year, with the 3 units fully up and running. But it's not just about profits.
It's not a business entity that we're looking to be extremely profitable. We certainly want to be sustainable and be able to cover our expenses, but the main benefit is going to be in the health and wellness initiatives and educational and training as well.
Community member Fran Cucci is a big supporter of the project. She says not only does the produce taste great, there's many opportunities.
I see potential here in terms of careers for our youth coming up as they become a little bit more aware of what's going on here. It gives opportunity for perhaps careers in horticulture, also business management, and I think just a little bit of a different, like some economic diversity in the community.
According to Harney, other First Nations are taking an interest in the project as well. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Nipissing First Nation.
Manitoba provincial politics are heating up with the election looming October 3rd. We asked all of the party leaders to come on and speak about their priorities for Indigenous peoples. Here's Liberal leader Dugald Lamont, who met with me earlier this week. Thanks for joining us, Dugald. What is the Liberal Party's priority for Indigenous people?
Look, when you look at provincial systems in Canada, they're the ones where Indigenous people face the most discrimination. It's one of the reasons why I am a provincial politician, because that's where I think all the changes need to be made. So we released our platform. The entire thing is written through the lens of reconciliation, but we have some very specific areas where we're aiming towards addressing issues on justice, addressing issues with CFS, returning $338 million that was taken from children in care, and making sure that as we move forward, we're working in partnership. So we would set up a secretariat, it's a terrible word, but basically a full-time roundtable with Indigenous folks and leadership, so that we're consulting in partnership on an ongoing basis as we move forward and change laws, regulations, and do things like implement UNDRIP and make sure that we're actually actively changing the things that need to change in provincial systems so that Indigenous people in Manitoba are recognized as full Manitobans.
One of the most pressing issues is the search of the landfill. What's your position on that?
So we were the first party. Before it even became a sort of more of a public issue, I wrote a letter to Grand Chief Kathy Merrick to let her and AMC know that we supported the search. To me, when I saw the folks who were supporting it, these are very serious people like Grand Chief Merrick and other Indigenous leaders. This is a simple issue of justice. We've committed to paying for at least half, starting with paying half of the and if we had to pay more, we would pay more. I believe we're the only party to make an official funding commitment, but this should never have been a political issue at all. This is just something that should have been part of a police budget. We don't have a referendum like this on whether people have a murder investigation happen or not. So this has been a truly terrible, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen, quite honestly, in politics, that this is being used as a wedge issue in an election year to make people pick and choose when really we should be standing on the side of victims of crime.
What would the first thing be that you would do if you were elected?
Well, I would probably sleep in if I possibly could, but that won't be allowed. Look, there's an enormous number of things we want to change, and but I think that's the important thing for us. We have to have a new budget. Unfortunately, the other two parties are sticking with a budget that has tons of tax cuts and not enough spending on the things we actually need. So we'd like to see a new budget come in to make sure we're doing things in investing, really in shoring up all the things that have been broken. And have been broken for so long, whether it's stuff that went wrong in the pandemic or systemic issues. We want to make sure that, for example, if the money is returned to children who were in care. There were thousands of children, First Nations children in Manitoba, who were taken from their families and their communities, and then the Manitoba government took their special children's allowances, and they did it from 2006 to 2019. They took $340 million and they kept it. And it's absolutely outrageous that this happened. And we're the only party that's committed formally to returning it and making sure that that happens. That needs to be one of the top things we do, because we're talking about youth and we're talking about young people. As a matter of reconciliation, you know, half the people on the streets of Winnipeg who are homeless were in CFS. The associations, the things that have happened, that have gone wrong with CFS are a national shame. And that's one of the reasons why making sure we're looking after kids and investing in people's futures, in the future of Indigenous young people in Manitoba is a top priority.
All right. Well, thanks for sitting down with us today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
The PC Party of Manitoba wrote to say that they would try to arrange an interview, as did the NDP Party of Manitoba, where leader Wab Kinew may be the first Indigenous premier in 150 years should his party win. Another quick break now. We will be back with weather and our photo of the day. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Calm weather and beautiful colors. This Wayway-Sikapo sunrise was captured by Gabrielle Brandon. The Wayway-Sikapo First Nation is in Western Manitoba. If you want to be featured as our photo of the day, email your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, Fredericton 21 tomorrow, St. John's 10. Northern Quebec, Inukjuak 11, La Grande River 16. Southern Quebec, Chibougamau 21, and Saint-Jovite 23. Peterborough 22, Toronto 21, and Sarnia 24 tomorrow. Further north, Big Trout Lake 21, and Wawa 21. Northern Manitoba, Churchill sunny and 18 tomorrow, Puckatawagan 19. Barons River and Princess Harbour 22, Brandon 17. Saskatchewan, Yorkton and Regina 21 tomorrow. Further north, Uranium City 19 and sunny, and Stony Rapids sunny and 20. Heading to northern Alberta, High Level and Fort Chip 21, Peace River and Grand Prairie 20. Calgary 18 and Edmonton 22. In southern BC, Bellacoola 21 and Vancouver, Victoria 20 tomorrow. Heading further north, Dease Lake 10, Fort Nelson 24. Rock River 1 and Mayo 9. Northwest Territories, Norman Wells 8 and Fort Simpson 22. Tuktoyaktuk and Paulatuk just 4. And in Cambridge Bay 11, Baker Lake 14. In Nunavut, Igloolik 3 and Pangnirtung 1. A group of Blackfoot members have hiked up nearly all of the mountain peaks at Waterton Lakes National Park, and they are leaving a smudge box at each site. APTN's Chris Stewart spoke to the 3 hikers.
This doesn't come every day, gotta take it now, can't throw it away. This ain't no time for
Nikki Jean, her husband Patrick Tanner, and Jamie Eaglebear are closing in on their goal of hiking all 32 mountain peaks at Waterton Lakes National Park. The group started hiking during COVID, and after seeing some disrespectful items that were put in a summit box by other hikers, they decided to do a smudge ceremony and leave a smudge box at each summit in the park. They spoke to an elder who was enthusiastic about the idea.
He showed us how to do the smudge, and I really think it's a positive impact for for the whole blood tribe.
The climbs began in the spring, and they are not easy. One day they hiked and climbed for 30 kilometers and reached 4 summits.
We believe that it promotes truth and reconciliation of the wrongs that were done to the Indigenous people in the past. Waterton Lakes is traditional Blackfoot territory, and we thought that just bringing these smudge boxes up there can reiterate that message.
And they are not doing it alone. Community members and people from away have joined them. Patrick Tanner says he hopes the hikes inspire youth. He says it's a special feeling to get to the top.
Even just getting to participate, to smudge with them too as well, is really uplifting. And to see them smile, and some of us go up there with hardships in our own personal lives too, and that's where we leave it. You leave a piece of you back on that mountain.
Their next outing is this weekend, their longest yet, at 38 kilometers.
Come out, come join us. We invite everybody, and it's really it's a really good feeling after you're done. And we're pretty much doing this for our people.
They have only 4 more peaks to finish. They say they are doing more hikes next year. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
I'm just in awe of them. That's all we have for you tonight. If you'd like to see these stories and more, head over to aptnnews.ca. Have a great evening.